So I was watching a video by Simon at Keep It Wholesome, and I'm not really on TikTok, but he makes some good YouTube videos, so check him out. But he was talking about this term called main charactering. You can probably put the pieces together of what that actually means. But I would say that to be a main character in your own story, you need a great soundtrack. I would say that the Maine are one of those main character soundtrack bands for me. My little skinny jean, long hair self back in the 7th and 8th grade loved the early stuff that the band put out, but it's been really since I was in high school back in 2015 when they've really cemented their long-term impact on my life. But the Maine have methodically grown from their original neon scene selves in 2008 to becoming one of the more unique stories in rock music. Coming from a scene where most of the bands have faded into somewhat obscurity, the Maine have become one of the more distinct icons of that era, managing to really transcend it. Now, the Maine are one of my favorite bands, but I wanted to give a very serious, very objective analysis of their music in honor of Sticky, their lead single off their 8th studio album dropping in July of 2021. This is a deep and you're watching No Vacuum. If you like listening to me talk about music sometimes, be sure to hit the subscribe button. We were supposed to hit 100 subscribers by the end of March, but we've gone to April without hitting that, so thanks for being here along the way. We'll do this. The video is more important than you subscribing, but I hope you do both, watch it and subscribe. So without further ado, we're gonna jump right into this one. So I'm actually really surprised that this is my first video where I'm analyzing pop punk and emo, and this most definitely will not be the last. But I want to fast forward in the whole timeline, tons of years we can go through, to 2007 and 2008, right around there. So at this point, the early 2000s pop punk wave of Blink-182, Sum 41, Yellowcard had started to age its way out, and the mall emo hot topic scene was in full swing and at peak popularity. At the highest level, you had the big hitters. Think Fall Out Boy, Paramore, and My Chemical Romance, the bands who dominated the radio and represent the moment best, both at the time and in present day. Below the handful of bands at that level of prominence, you had a lot of mid-tier and low-tier bands who are really trying to ride off the success of the big hitters, just like you had in that early 2000s pop punk boom. But this crop of bands really widened the sphere of what the sound represented, and most people would come to call this the neon pop punk era.
I mean, just to rattle off a couple of bands in this era, you have the Friday Night Boys, Hello Goodbye, Metro Station, Artist vs. Poet, Every Avenue, and I could go on for a long time because this scene was full of great bands who are definitely worth listening to if you have the chance.
I think this classification is a little bit limiting, but all in all, this middle and lower tier sort of sounded more as like a fad than pop punk itself really was by almost definition. And yeah, you'd have the big bands really going out to bat for these smaller bands, taking them out on tour and supporting them in any way they could. But the middle to lower tier of the genre really became a cult in its own right. And the Maine were actually one of the most popular bands to come out of this middle tier of the scene. Their debut EP, The Way We Talk, and debut full-length, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, are really the icons of this part of their career and of the larger movement in general. It was the Maine's first two records that really set them up for success in this larger neon pop punk industrial complex or whatever. I mean, they put up covers on the Punk Go series, they hopped on the soundtrack of Your Summer Tour, which sounds like a really great time. It was like Boys Like Girls in Good Charlotte playing in massive suburban parking lots. What a great time. And they just managed to associate them well with the larger Fearless Records clique, the likes of Mayday Parade, Artist vs. Poet, and other bands of that band who were working together to propel this middle tier of the scene into some consistent level of prominence.
Eventually though, these neon bands lost steam as quickly as they became popular in the first place.
Now, of course, it's really easy to say that this downfall was meant to happen, and hindsight is 2020 or what have you, but the signs were already pretty clear by the time 2010 rolled around. I mean, Fall Out Boy had just announced a hiatus, My Chemical Romance and Paramore were doing well, but not really dominating, and then you had this whole new set of like indie pop, indie rock bands that had started to take over the mainstream appetite for rock music, with the likes of Foster the People and Passion Pit starting to gain prominence in favor of these other emo and pop punk bands. It had only been a year or two, but the genre had already lost prominence at the top tier and also at this middle tier that the Maine dominated. The Maine recognized very quickly that their sound wouldn't be able to travel very well beyond that 2008-2009 period where it was really dominant. Sure, the Maine could have tried to write a handful of potential chart toppers on Black and White, but only a handful of bands from the scene had even managed to do that at the genre's peak. let alone on this downward trend of the sound.
The Maine knew that the movement that brought them up in the first place was losing steam by the time they were creating Black and White, their major label's sophomore record.
It was pretty clear that the Can't Stop Won't Stop sound wouldn't really travel super well to Black and White, so instead of trying to rehash this outdated sound, the Maine aged it up and cleaned it up by a few years. The band got rid of the synths and built a more robust live guitar sound. They worked with Howard Benson, a producer who's worked with folks like My Chemical Romance, Daughtry, and Kelly Clarkson. This meant that he could blend pop punk, butt rock, and glossy pop in a really balanced and nuanced way, and what we got was a more sophisticated pop rock sound. Creatively, this was one of the best decisions the band could have made. Instead of trying to push the sound that made them popular in the first place, they jumped ship earlier than many of their counterparts would. This made it a lot easier for them to take lessons from this and continue to reapply them as they adjusted their sound. They knew that this shift had to come, and I'm not here to speculate whether they wanted this to begin with or whether this was a business decision, but all in all, the fact that they decided that this sound had to change and that they're willing to decide that early enough in their career so that they can shift and pivot as the time went on. One of the most telling signs of all of this was that after Black and White, the Maine left the major label sphere. They were actually signed for another record, but they ended up recording their third record, Pioneer, on their own and just kind of exploring their own sounds. At a basic level, what Pioneer did was it stayed consistent. The band doubled down on the more measured sound of Black and White, and they kept their cleaned up look from that record as well, along with keeping the lineup that they had intact. All of these factors kept consistency in terms of their image that they were forming, as well as just the creative tides that come with having the same band members from record to record. They had all grown together as songwriters, and they were committed to continue doing that throughout the 2010s.
The Maine followed up Pioneer 2 years later with Forever Halloween, which also came with the launch of their label 8123 Records.
A label that the band would begin building up to release and promote their own music. Now, 8123 became a label for the Maine in all of their independent glory. It serves as a way for them to manage their merch, distribution, and general business management that separates the creativity from those money-making aspects of their music. It even has its own festival, a mini celebration of the Maine and all of their friends that they host in the heart of Phoenix. Not only is 8123 a vessel for the Maine themselves, but it's also an avenue for other bands and figures from the scene that helped make the Maine and other peers. And the label has signed the Rocket to the Moon's Nick Santino, and 8123 Fest has brought in the likes of We the Kings, Mayday Parade, and Twin XL, which features a few members of the summer set. Indulging in this nostalgia helps the band stay grounded in where they came from, but also using 8123 as a symbol of where they want to go. Of course, it also doesn't hurt that the sound that built the band to begin with remains extremely popular, probably more popular than you would have expected. Spotify didn't exist when this neon pop punk boom was happening, but these bands in the scene pull in pretty solid listener numbers for bands that have been broken up for a number of years. I mean, Forever the Sickest Kids has 700,000 listeners on Spotify, Every Avenue has 500,000, and A Rocket to the Moon has 840,000 listeners. People now, more than ever, are nostalgic for this middle tier sound that really peaked 10, 12 years ago. Spotify says that a lot of folks are finding the band through playlists like Pure Pop Punk, 2000's Heartache, and Covered in Punk. Playlists that represent only a small sliver of the band's success to date.
For all those fans who are discovering the band through these nostalgic channels, the Maine have an entire catalog of records that they can go to build off that nostalgia and find a band that they can actually deeply love, not only for their old stuff, but for all of the new stuff they've put out since those heyday days back in the late 2000s.
The band has become a really good case study in just staying consistent. They've managed to release a record every other year since Pioneer dropped, staying prolific without overstaying their welcome. And this consistency has actually done the band really well in terms of discovery. It regularly creates opportunities through their new music to find new fans through promotion of the record, going on tour, and just having organic discovery that comes through the internet and streaming services. This provides the band with a wide array of sounds that people can discover. People can jump into any of those albums if they decide that they actually want to explore what the Maine have been doing. And the fact that those records are coming out so regularly and they continue to grow their sound can really draw in listeners who at this point are probably in their 30s and 40s, having grown up with the band in the 2000s.
It also doesn't hurt that the band's take on pop rock And their internet savvy makes them pretty accessible to younger fans too, not just limiting themselves to the nostalgic folks who are listening to their old stuff since the beginning of their career.
The band's combination of fueling nostalgia and building new fans work together in creating a fan base who can grow with the band. Every new record that the Maine puts out leaves an impression on me and on the lives of those other fans who have been following them for so many years. Of course, there's a nostalgia I associate with Can't Stop, Won't Stop and Black and White, but the spring and summer memories of college that are coded through American Candy, Lovely Little Lonely, and You Are Okay are 10 years later and are still just as potent as those more emotional ones that I experienced back in middle school. Even though there's a little trough when I didn't listen to them late in high school, my nostalgia drew me back to the band just a couple of years ago, just as it did for many others, and has managed to keep me hooked ever since. The Maine have been part of my world since high school, and only a few bands in my universe have managed to have this lifelong arc.
Not only has the band cemented memories amongst their fans from years before in their career, but the fans can also trust the Maine to be the soundtrack for future memories that may come as fans are growing up beyond the records that they've already released. And that lifelong arc is really something special, and that's really something that sticks with me as a fan and has made them so sticky in my life for so long.
Thank you so much for watching this manifesto. It's kind of funny doing that in silence because it's like you can't add the sound effects in silence. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. It's been really fun to put together. One of my more personal ones so far, but hopefully that's something we will see more on this channel that is very new, very fresh, and incredibly relevant. So please share with your friends, with your haters, and let the people know that No Vacuum is the place to be. I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off, but be sure to stay tuned, stay subscribed, so you can catch more videos here. I'm Adit, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you at some point in the future. Take care.